Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Ninan. Thank you for joining us. It's high drama on Capitol Hill today as the Senate advanced the nomination of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, setting up an eventual final vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 51, the noes are 49. The motion is agreed to.
Senators are taking a key vote to proceed on the nomination. If it passed, 51 to 49, and nearly all along party lines. Key holdout, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska was the one Republican senator to vote against pushing the nomination forward. Republican Senator Susan Collins and Democrat Joe Manchin voted yes to proceed, but we do not know yet how they will vote on Kavanaugh's actual confirmation. Senator Collins has been facing pressure from both parties on this, and while she said yes to proceed, she will be announcing her decision on Kavanaugh at 3 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. Senator Jeff Flake, who was key to getting the FBI to investigate assault allegations, also voted yes to proceed. He now says he's likely to say yes to the final vote unless something big changes. The White House today is expressing confidence in his confirmation. After the vote, the president tweeted, "Very proud of the U.S. Senate for voting yes to advance the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh." Our Nicole Killian is on Capitol Hill and joins us now. So, Nicole, take us through exactly what comes next. How does this confirmation process proceed?
Well, at this point, the clock starts. So after we saw the vote this morning, senators will now have approximately 30 hours for debate. And so that will take us up until tomorrow afternoon when senators will hold that final vote on Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation.
It was a dramatic moment, Nicole, when Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski voted no to proceed. Do we know what was behind that decision and exactly how was it received on Capitol Hill?
Well, it's certainly something that doesn't appear to have come easy for Senator Murkowski. I mean, she almost whispered her no vote when it came to her time on the floor. And just a short time ago, she did tell reporters that she had not made a decision, literally almost until she walked into the chamber this morning. Certainly, she has been facing a lot of pressure from her constituents. I actually spoke with several of them yesterday amid all of those protests that we saw here on Capitol Hill. You know, sexual assault, rape, these are big issues in the state of Alaska and a serious problem, say these constituents. And so they have traveled all the way across the country to convey that message to her and to make sure that she understands how significant her vote is, how it could impact those constituents back home. In fact, about 100 Alaskan women are expected to gather outside of her office at this hour to essentially thank her for her vote this morning and encourage her to stay strong and essentially try to keep the pressure on her to vote no against Judge Kavanaugh tomorrow.
It's a good point of just how much their votes matter domestically, back at home locally as well. You know, we still don't know exactly how Senator Collins and Senator Manchin will vote. Flake looks like he's a yes. What kind of pressure are they facing at this point, especially from their local constituency, which you were talking about?
Well, it's certainly quite similar. I mean, we know that a number of protesters have been inundating Senator Collins and have been outside of her office. They've been protesting outside of her offices in Maine. And so she, too, because she is a moderate Republican, kind of faces a similar dilemma. She has not tipped her hand either way, which way she's going to vote. Obviously, this morning we saw that she did vote yes to proceed, but she still has not made clear what her final decision will be. And as you reported, of course, we hope to know that decision this afternoon at 3 o'clock.
Nicole Killian, thank you very much for giving us the latest from Capitol Hill. CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reed is at the White House. Paula, we know this was a big moment for the White House. What are you hearing from them?
At this point, the White House says Sarah Huckabee Sanders tweeted that she was pleased that, quote, Senator Collins decided to stand by her convictions, doing the right thing to confirm Kavanaugh. Well, we haven't heard from the president just yet. We are told that inside the White House, they are, quote, happy, of course, with Senator Collins and Senator Manchin, but they are waiting until the final votes are cast before celebrating. But, Rena, this cannot be underestimated in terms of the importance to President Trump and the reasons he was elected, assuming that Kavanaugh is confirmed and everything goes according to plan. I mean, this will transform the Supreme Court. This will create one of the most conservative courts, a conservative majority that will last for decades, assuming that no one dies. And this is something President Trump campaigned on. He was able to solidify a lot of evangelical votes because of his plan, because of the promises he made about the court. You may remember one of the turning points in his campaign was the death of Justice Scalia. Around that time, then candidate Trump, he came out with a list of people who he said he would appoint to the highest court in the land. A lot of people looked at that list and they were quite pleased with it. The polling for the presidential election showed that 1 out of 5 voters was very focused on the Supreme Court. That was important to them. The majority of those voters voted for President Trump. So if he can get Judge Kavanaugh confirmed, this will be arguably one of the biggest achievements of President Trump's administration.
It certainly will be. And Paula, I'm curious what they have to say about momentum going into midterms, having this big win behind them likely.
Well, this is certainly a win in terms of delivering on a campaign promise, but there is concern that the Kavanaugh controversy was kind of a rallying cry. It was helping to close the sort of enthusiasm deficit that they were seeing with GOP voters. So the question now is, once Kavanaugh is confirmed, will some of the GOP voters who were angry, who felt that Democrats were using Kavanaugh and smearing who they believed was a good man or that this was somehow politically motivated, will they still be as motivated to go to the polls now that he's been confirmed? There was some sort of political strategy that argued if you could drag this Kavanaugh controversy out through the midterms, you could almost guarantee that a lot of these GOP voters would go to the polls. Now the question is whether or not, when the midterms come around in November, they will be as motivated as Democrats, who are obviously not pleased with how this has gone.
Paula Reed joining us from the White House. Paula, thank you very much. Joining me now, CBS News political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and Democratic strategist Lynda Tran. She's also a CBSN political contributor. Okay, ladies, let's start off looking at the holdouts here. We've got Senator Collins, we've got Senator Joe Manchin. What do their votes mean at this point? And is there a way of gauging, Lynda, exactly how you think they might vote at this point?
Wow. I mean, this has been such a roller coaster of a nomination process. It's really hard to say how things are going to turn out. I think if you had asked this morning whether Lisa Murkowski was going to be a no vote, I think it could have been anybody's guess. So, I mean, there are a lot of dynamics that I think both senators are taking into consideration as they weigh whether or not to support the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, not the least of which is the recent rash of polling happening in both of their states. So Susan Collins, in polling in the last several days, it's shown that if she votes to support Kavanaugh, it is more likely that she's going to lose support among some core demographics and key voters in her state. And Joe Manchin, in his own state, he has been up in the polls, both his internal polling information that he's put out there and some of the more independent ones that have come out. He's been up. That said, you know, he's in a state that Donald Trump won by double digits. And so in any case, he's going to be worried about what his decision in this vote is going to do to his support for the election in just a few weeks.
Lynda, Collins voted to proceed, but, go ahead with the vote. But she says she's going to announce her actual vote on Kavanaugh at 3 o'clock. Why go that route? Why not just say, here's how I'm voting? Why have the theatrics?
Well, I don't know if it's theatrics necessarily from her perspective. As we saw in the potential repeal of the Affordable Care Act just a few months ago, Senator McCain voted to proceed, voted in favor of cloture, but then he ultimately ended up voting against repeal. So I think in this particular case, she probably wanted to send the message that it was time to move on, to end the conversation that has existed up until now. And she's probably spent a lot of time thinking about exactly where she stands on this and wants to have the opportunity to present her thinking in a more controlled environment for her.
Leslie, what's your take on that?
Absolutely. I mean, in a place where there's such tremendous chaos, it's nice to have some degree of control, and that's what she can do. And look at it, 50% of the people are going to be disappointed in her choice, maybe more. And because of that, she's really laying out her argument. Agree with her or not, you have to respect that choice and the time she's taking to define that, especially as such a swing voter and the ramifications it has, not only as somebody who's seen more as a moderate, it can go both ways, but also as somebody who's seen as one of the few female senators who can have such an impact and kind of understand the resonance among so many constituencies. And that voice and that kind of I hear you is a really important aspect of this.
You know, Leslie, Senator Flake says that he's going to vote yes unless, and this is his words, something big happens. What is he waiting for? Moses to come down and part the Red Sea here? Moses maybe being Senator Coons? I don't know. Leslie, what's behind this? Why make that announcement?
They need to see something more dramatic, and it's hard to think that the tension can get much higher than it is right now. I am not saying, you already heard about the high fives at the White House. I'm not saying they're popping champagne, but they certainly have it on ice. And they are counting this. They're looking and feeling very confident in Flake's vote of yes. But I will tell you, there are definitely rifts on the Republican side with respect to Kavanaugh. You've seen this rallying, this base of support, this energized among voters and grassroots activists. But there's still a lot of people that feel it's entirely too politicized, that Kavanaugh is too politicized, and he's seen more as an operative and a lawyer than somebody who's an independent arbiter in terms of legal cases. So I do not think, regardless of what happens tomorrow, that this is over. There are going to be a lot of people feeling that the court has been prejudiced in terms of politicized moving forward.
Lynda, we know that Republicans are still trying to swing a few votes their way, so are Democrats as well. How likely are folks on the fence at this point to change their mind?
I think it's probably unlikely. I mean, at this point, they have already been public about which position they're taking on this. For some folks, that means that some of the pressure, at least among activists, may have lightened a bit. And for others, those internal conversations that they are having, whether it's with the White House or with other members in the Senate, those conversations are going to continue even beyond this vote, in my opinion. The stakes are so high in terms of potential policy changes in the future. We've talked a lot about how Brett Kavanaugh, having a conservative bent, has the potential to really change the dynamics on the Supreme Court for generations to come. So those conversations about the implications will continue. But in terms of the drama that Leslie talked about, the dynamics of this moment, I think that they have faced up to what they're going to face up to.
Leslie, speaking of the dynamics of this moment, this has been a major rallying cry for both Republicans and Democrats. Ultimately, if Kavanaugh is confirmed, what does it mean for both parties?
And I will tell you, in the Senate, it means that there may go back to looking at the 60 vote for cloture that they had in the past, that basically there need to be about 10 moderates who can come together and say, we don't want extremes one way or the other. We want to find more of a collective way to agree. So the president has a right. I want to draw that distinction. The conservative jurist, to have a conservative nominee, was always in the cards. It was really the reason people supported President Trump, and he delivered on that promise. So that's not the difference. It's how politicized it is, and that there's this taint around this particular candidate that a lot of Republicans and Democrats feel is not going to be erased, even if he is on the bench. And that's what I think the fear is, and Lynda alludes to that looking forward. It is going to have a lasting effect beyond what happens in November. You go look to 2020 and also kind of how people strategically view the courts.
On that point as well, Lynda, I want to ask you, today marks 1 year since the Me Too movement. If Kavanaugh makes it to the court, what does this mean for the Me Too movement and for women who suffer from sexual assault and are trying to come forward?
Well, I think that if Judge Kavanaugh moves forward, it's going to feel like such a slap in the face to so many women who are survivors, men as well, who are struggling with what their own experiences have done to their lives and to the view that they have on the world. And for somebody like Dr. Blasey Ford to have come forward to share so much of her pain and her trauma on a national stage such as she had, and for that to feel like it didn't matter, may suggest to some young women and young men who are struggling with whether to come forward with their stories, it may suggest to them that they ought not to. It may suggest to them that their voices just don't matter at a time when, up until this point, it has felt like things had been trending in the direction of a lot more transparency, a lot more empowerment for survivors. So it's highly troubling, and that is so far beyond the politics of this moment. It is not partisan at all. It is a statement about where our culture is and what may come to pass in the coming years.
We're going to have to leave it there. Lynda Tran, Leslie Sanchez, so grateful you both could join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.